Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anupama, Professor at Department of Economics, Punjabi University, Patiala. I am here talking on behalf of Dr. Philender Kumar Sudan, Professor, Department of Economics, University of Jammu. I am going to talk about the module Consequences of Population, Health and Environment Interactions from Demography of Climate Adaptation. So students, we are going to discuss about the effects of environmental change on population, its health and the livelihood options. Poverty is the cause of environmental degradation in developing countries in numerous ways. Poor households attempt to improve livelihoods in all situations. For this to operationalize, they use cost-effective strategies that bring them in direct conflict with environmental sustainability. Examples are numerous, such as poor rural families supporting themselves with subsistence slash and burn agriculture, use forest products to meet the needs of fuel, fodder, and building materials, and live in ecologically fragile zones, especially after migrating from rural to urban areas. In poor rural communities in developing nations, agriculture is the principal source of livelihood. The heavy dependence on agriculture calls for continuous family expansion. This implies a large number of bread earners. The economic policies too have a direct bearing on the population and their behavior and attitude. The extremely high rates of deforestation are associated with the expansion of cash crops for export. This causes decline in forest and reduces the availability of arable land to small farmers. The high incidence of poverty can also push rural poor to destroy the resources to eke out their livelihoods. Hence, the present module aims to explore the consequences of population, health, and environment relationship by focusing on poverty, wealth, land, food and agriculture, deforestation, energy use, climate change, water availability, coastal and marine life consequences for health, emerging infectious diseases, and this module also aims to provide future policy options. Poverty. Nowadays, poverty is used in much broader term than income alone. Poverty includes access to opportunity, security, and empowerment. Keeping this in view, ethnic minorities, rural residents, and women are very poor compared to their counterparts. The disadvantaged population is disproportionately affected by environmental degradation. The ethnic and religious minorities live in heavily polluted areas with inadequate sanitation and health services. They also face severe challenges in meeting basic human needs. With increase in the prices of environmental goods such as water and land, the pressure to earn livelihood increases. Most of the superior goods are beyond their reach. The changing environmental and market conditions pose many risks to the vulnerable population groups. Indigenous communities have been threatened widely by the environmental change. For example, the native population of the Mackenzie Basin in northwest Canada hunts, fish and trap wildlife for their food, income and traditional clothing. The environmental changes such as more landslides and forest fires and declining groundwater levels jeopardize their traditional lifestyles. Wealth. More wealth brings greater opportunities and challenges for environmental management in the form of economic development and better living standards. All these facilitates higher access to education, health, water, and sanitation. However, more wealth creates more residues in terms of solid waste and greenhouse gases. Between 1960 and 2000, the municipal solid waste generated in the United States increased from 88 million to 232 million tons. Most of this waste is either burned or deposited in landfills, thereby causing air pollution and groundwater pollution. More wealth and rapid economic development also results in higher use of motor vehicles, causing negative environmental effects. For example, in 2000, about 70% of the world's automobiles were in more developed countries. For this, you can see figure 1. And the United States had more than 400 cars per 1,000 people. The less developed countries like India and Bangladesh, there were only 5 cars per 1,000 people in 2000. The increase in use of motor vehicles is associated with high pollution and land use problems. For example, the car-related pollution kills more people than car accidents in Austria, France, and Switzerland. There has been rapid increase in 2- and 3-wheeled motor vehicles in the less developed world. For example, 2-wheeled motor vehicles rose from 9 per 1,000 people to 134 per 1,000 people between 1990 and 2000 in Cambodia. Similarly, in India, this ratio rose from 15 to 29 during the 1990s. More wealth is also associated with greater food demand. With increase in income, people tend to add more animal fats to their diets. The raising of more livestock requires more land. Rapid population growth and a shift to high-fat diets in less developed countries calls for 2% increase in agriculture production until 2030. This poses additional pressure on land and natural resources. Land, food, and agriculture. During the decade of 1985 to 1995, population growth was higher than food production in many developing countries, including Africa. There were 2.2 billion more people to feed in 2002 compared to 1972. The urbanization process has encroached upon agricultural land. The prime agricultural land has been lost through soil degradation and overgrazing. Besides, soil erosion, salinization, use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides contributes more to the degradation process. It is to be noted that population is growing fastest in the regions with the least efficient food production and distribution systems. The disease food security linkage is intense in Africa. Agriculture production and food safety is threatened by AIDS in southern and eastern Africa. Nearly 7 million agriculture workers have died of AIDS since 1985 in these nations. It is estimated that 16 million more agriculture workers will die due to AIDS in these countries between 2000 and 2020. The decline in agriculture workers will range from 13% in Tanzania to 26% in Namibia between 1985 and 2020 due to AIDS. Most of the less developed nations have the potential to increase their food production, but the cost of cultivation using chemicals is very high. Biotechnology may play its role in improving productivity gains using disease-resistant varieties of crops. Besides, bioengineering may increase the yield of some crops by re-engineering the photosynthesis process, reducing the need for pesticides or water, or increasing the tolerance of saline soils. There are growing economic, social, health, and ethical concerns about the genetically modified or GM crops. Some governments are against the GM foods, even in food shortage conditions. In 2002, massive agricultural losses were reported in sub-Saharan African countries due to severe drought. In response to this, the international community offered tons of grains and other food to these nations. However, Zambia rejected thousands of tons of corn donated by the United States due to likelihood of the GM kernels. Therefore, there is a need to increase the food production by strengthening the institutional framework and infrastructure. The farmers should be given better access to credit, training programs, and improving infrastructure. All this needs to be improved in developed as well as the developing nations. The technological innovations in use of improved seeds, chemical fertilizers, insecticides, and herbicides are necessary for future increases in food production. Deforestation. Forests provide a number of functions resulting in buffering the soil erosion and land degradation, protecting the biological diversity and regulating climatic variability. The deforestation had disrupted these functions. During the 90s, human activities resulted in the deforestation of 146 million hectares or 5,63,709 square miles. This is roughly the combined areas of Colombia and Ecuador. On positive side, 52 million hectares of forests were regained due to reforestation efforts and natural regrowth during same period. South America and Africa had experienced the greatest deforestation. In Asia, the deforestation was offset by reforestation. The direct causes of deforestation are connected with demographic, social, and economic changes. Deforestation affects both people and the environment. Forests have an important role in balancing the Earth's ecosystem. The loss of biodiversity and climatic abnormalities due to deforestation require urgent attention. The loss of forest, many plants and animals are threatened. Attempts have been made to compensate this loss through reforestation. However, replanted forest cannot have the varied spectrum of species found in natural forests. All this makes forests more vulnerable to natural stresses. Energy use. The energy production and consumption has been increasing steadily for several decades. This has high impact on climate variability. For example, in 2001, commercial global energy production was 9.3 billion metric tons of oil equivalents. More than 1 billion metric tons of oil equivalent energy was produced by burning traditional fuels, including animal wastes. The major energy comes from the fossil fuel, liquid petroleum, solid, that is coal or lignite, or gas, that is the natural gas. With rising world population, demand for energy has been rising rapidly. For example, petroleum and solid fuels respectively consist of 39% and 24% of global commercial energy production, and the natural gas provides 23% of global commercial energy in 2000. Traditional fuels like firewood and biomass meets the energy needs of millions of poor in less developed countries. The unplanned collection and use of these fuel resources has its implications on ecosystems and poses environmental problems such as soil erosion, loss of watershed areas, and emission of particulates and other pollutants. The energy consumption is not uniform across the globe. The developed nations are using more than 9 times greater energy per capita compared to less developed nations. In 1999, per capita energy use was nearly twice among Americans than that of Europeans, nearly 8 times that of Asians, and 15 times that of Africans. In the period 1977 to 1997, the total energy consumption increased by 274% in Africa and 187% in Asia. The development needs has fueled their high energy requirements rapidly. Alongside this has resulted in increased the carbon emissions in the environment. The global energy use will grow by 1.7% annually between 2001 and 2025. This will be more than the rate of world population growth. In less developed countries, the energy consumption is expected to increase by 2.8% per year, causing total consumption to increase by 58%. In Asia, the projected increase in energy use accounts for 40% of the total increase in world consumption in 2025. It will be as high as 69% of the increase in total energy consumption in developing countries due to an ever-increasing middle and affluent class in Asia. It is to be noted that almost all of this energy growth will involve fossil fuel as the basic source of energy requirement. Therefore, there is a great concern of environmental degradation in developing nations caused by greater use of fossil fuels. The alternative energy sources like the liquid fuels have the potential of increasing production costs and reducing the growth prospects. This calls for more investment in research and development to meet growing energy requirement in a cost-effective way. Climate change. The carbon dioxide has the potential of trapping terrestrial radiations inside the Earth's atmosphere, which is termed as greenhouse effect. This natural process helps in making life possible on the planet. With the Industrial Revolution, the greenhouse gases have been increasing. The atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide have increased to nearly one-third. It has been estimated that the atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide are growing by 1.5% per annum. In recent past, the carbon emission levels have come down. This is attributed to slowing population growth, which has caused the increases in the total emissions of greenhouse gases. The human activity adds 3 million tons of oil per year to the oceans through extraction, processing, and transport. With more industrialization, there will be rapid use emission of these gases. The human activity has played a wider role in raising the global temperature and the climatic abnormalities. Kyoto Protocol has been framed to reduce emissions. However, the United States rejected the agreement in 2001. Some countries still committed to Kyoto Protocol to meet the obligations to reduce global emissions. The most influential developed countries have made the global commitments less sincere. Climate changes have led to more frequent extreme weather events such as droughts, violent storms, and flooding. Also, several thousand people died in France due to high temperatures in summer 2003. Global warming is causing melting of the polar ice caps, raising sea levels, and threatening the coastal regions. It has been estimated that if the sea level were to rise by 150 centimeters, Bangladesh could lose up to 16% of its land area, thereby displacing 34 million people. Extreme weather affects human health. The intense precipitation and flooding can cause outbreaks of cholera, dengue, etc. Severe drought often triggers migration of people and animals, causing the spread of infectious diseases. This is the first step in the spread of pandemics. The climate change can increase the location, spread, and intensity of insect and waterborne diseases. The intense climatic conditions cause the disease carrying pathogens to thrive. Water availability. Water is one of the most plentiful natural resources. Only 3% of water is salt-free and drinkable. Moreover, 70% of fresh water is locked in glaciers or icebergs. Water supplies are altered due to droughts or floods. One-third of the world's population suffers from moderate to high water stress. Water consumption is more than 10% of renewable freshwater resources. Humans alter freshwater system by building dams and flood control systems, draining wetlands, clearing forests, and modifying land within watersheds. Large dams have increased sevenfold and collected 14% of the world's runoff. Dams create reservoirs to provide drinking water, support agriculture, and generate electricity. Dams have also damaged the natural habitats and blocked the flow of water and migration of the local communities of the region. During the last half-century, irrigation of crops has been led to rapid increase in food production. It accounts for about 80% of human consumption of water. The population growth is increasing demand for water for industrial and household use. This results in reducing the water for the irrigation purpose. In such situations, it is difficult to maintain water levels in the rivers and wetlands. Groundwater supplements local water needs. The replenishment of groundwater is a slow process. The rate of pumping out of groundwater exceeds the rate of replenishment. This lowers the water table and quality of water. The subsidies also contribute to the loss of groundwater. The increasing farm yield decreases water quality. It allows harmful components to enter into aquifers. More than 1 billion people in Asia depend on groundwater for household use. In many areas, water reserves are threatened by depletion and contamination, which causes a range of issues. The most deadly diseases are diarrhea. In 2001, diarrheal infections caused nearly 2 million deaths in children under age 5, primarily from dehydration. Many more children suffer from non-fatal diarrhea. This causes children to be underweight, physically stunted, vulnerable to disease, and drained of energy. About 18% of the world's population still lacks access to safe drinking water. Nearly 40% population has no access to sanitation. Rural population is the most affected. The situation in urban areas is not better. The water and sanitary conditions are highly deplorable. More than 1 billion people currently live in slums of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The drinking water is naturally scarce in Middle East and North Africa, that is MENA. MENA hosts 12 of the world's 15 water-scarce countries. The population growth rate has been more than doubled between 1970 and 2001, thereby reducing the availability of fresh water. By 2030, about half of the world's population is projected to live in water-stressed areas. Coastal and marine life. More than 3 billion people live along a coastline or within 200 kilometers. By 2025, the coastal pollution may double. Nearly 14 megacities with population of at least 10 million people are located on coasts. About 11 megacities, including Bangkok, Jakarta, and Shanghai, are in Asia. 2/5 of smaller cities, that is, the cities with population of 1 to 10 million, are located near coasts. The urbanization of the coastal regions has created severe pollution. Sewerage remains the largest source of contamination. 80% of the marine pollution results from land-based sources. Population growth contributes to rapid degradation of coastal and marine ecosystems. There has been growing damage to coral reefs and mangrove forests worldwide. It is necessary to maintain a healthy coastal habitat for marine organisms. The global fish catch has remained high. The total catches in the northern, western, and southeastern Atlantic Ocean have stabilized over the last decade. The global fish supply is being threatened by viruses and bacteria. By 2020, marine harvests would be below current levels. This means less seafood available per capita due to the rapid population growth. Now let us discuss about the consequences for health. The communicable diseases account for about 1/5 of annual deaths worldwide. Environmental interventions may help reduce 60% of disease from acute respiratory infections, 90% from diarrheal diseases, 50% from chronic respiratory conditions, and 90% from malaria. Air pollution is responsible for infections and medical suffering in population. Improvement in energy efficiency and conservation help regulate the scale of leaded gasoline and technological advances. Despite improvements, urban areas continue to suffer from poor air quality. Air pollution is most severe in large cities like Delhi. The health consequences are considerable. The increasing morbidity rates have serious impact on the human efficiency. For instance, air pollution in less developed countries is responsible for 50 million of chronic coughing in children below 14 years. Exposure to lead remains a principal environmental problem. It can cause anemia, kidney disease, hearing damages, and impaired fertility. Half of the world's households use biomass fuels. The exposure to the indoor pollution is not uniform in a given household. Women and children are regularly exposed to indoor air pollution. It causes lung cancer, stillbirths, low birth weight, heart ailments, and Chronic respiratory diseases. Emerging infectious diseases. Rapid population growth and migration has facilitated the emergence of numerous infectious diseases. Increased contact with wildlife and associated diseases has led to outbreaks of diseases. Clearing forests for agricultural or pasture use can also spread disease to humans. Farmers in Venezuela's Portuguese state converted millions of acres of forest into cropland. This attracts the rodents causing the deadly guanidinovirus virus. Similarly, the Malaysian farmers contracted a virus spread to their pigs by fruit bats displaced by deforestation. The disease transmission also affects the wildlife and livestock. The bovine tuberculosis has spread rapidly among buffaloes in East Africa. These diseases have constrained the rapidly expanding deer farming industry in China and Southeast Asia. Many infectious diseases such as rabies, hog, cholera, and screwworm are potentially dangerous to humans. Looking to the future, the relationships between population, health, and the environment are highly complex. Therefore, there is a need to understand deeply the population, health, and the environment relationships. There is also need to document, evaluate, and disseminate information on the relationship. In this respect, the first and foremost step is that of building a knowledge base. The relationships among environmental and demographic variables constitute an emerging field of investigation. There is a need to generate information using geographic information systems and remote sensing. The patterns and trends in population distribution and its relationship with land resource use need to be analyzed. Refining the programs. The man-environment linkage need to be understood deeply. The population, health, and environmental concerns are needed to be integrated with environmental issues, reproductive health, or population education programs. There is need to develop conservation strategy by linking development prospects with the environment. There is need to strengthen and encourage the community-based efforts to address environmental stress, fertility, migration, women's health, women's educational status, and economic decisions using strategies to incorporate activities within the population, health, and environment in their programs. Engaging policymakers. There is need to integrate the population, health, and environment concerns into national development strategies for promoting sustainable development. There is also need to formulate environmental and population policies, developing sustainable programs, conducting research, and coordinating population, reproductive health, and environmental activities. Above all, the policymakers must have a deeper understanding of population, health, and environment interactions. Finding creative solutions. Human population has to find more efficient ways to use resources and to substitute a more abundant resource for a rare or costly one. This calls for cost-effective technological progress to ease environmental problems. Technology needs to be created for better performance in cost-effective way. Use of nuclear energy, wind, and solar energy are other cost-effective and cleaner ways to meet the growing energy demand. recycling of manufacturing materials is a kind of substitution which needs to be promoted. So students, let us sum up what we have learned from this module. There are numerous barriers to analyze population, health, and environmental relationships. Population and environment are closely linked with food security, environmental health, water availability, energy production and consumption, and economic opportunities. Investment in family planning and reproductive health services benefit people and the environment. The most rapid fertility declines have improved child survival rates. The investment in human capital and women empowerment can yield immense long-term benefits. There is growing need to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels for economic growth. Besides, developing nations must mobilize support for resource conservation and biodiversity protection and attend environmental health threats. In the recent years, the international community has demonstrated a willingness and ability to address the complex long-term issues. Many governments and communities lack the resources or institutional capacity to build sound environmental policies. There is a need to strengthen investment in education and primary health care to address economic growth with less environmental impact. In this context, the intergovernmental cooperation and participation becomes imperative. Besides, the transfer of resources and technology can help the poorer nations to address the environmental concern. That's all with today's module. I hope you must have enjoyed it. Thank you.